Hi guys, welcome to a new video. Yeah, I'm sorry that I haven't posted on this channel for quite a while, but I know I always say this and then go on to say that I'm back now. So I'm sorry that I took a long time off, but I'm back now. And then I never actually post more than one video, so sorry about that. But this time I think I actually am back now because I've got a new series idea that I want to do on the channel. So, I know I've done a video in the past explaining the differences between your moon sign in astrology and your sun sign in astrology, and sort of comparing the differences between them as far as what they actually mean in your chart to a degree. But I don't believe, sorry, that I went more in depth as to the specific signs, each sign, as it relates to what planet it falls into. So that's a new series idea that I've thought of right now that I can do. So obviously, first sign of the zodiac is Aries. So logically, I'm going to start with them first. So in this video, I'm going to be going over the differences, or in my experience, what I find are the differences between having your um, sun in Aries and having your moon in Aries. So if you can hear, I'm kind of stuttering a bit because this video is not very planned. I just decided to do it spur of the moment. To be fair, most of my videos go like that, but yeah, hopefully it doesn't sound like my explanations are too, bad. So Aries moon. Now, in my personal experience, or from what I've read upon astrology, I don't know too many people with an Aries moon in my personal life, but the experiences I do have, the limited experiences I do have, coupled with what I read about astrology, to me, it seems like the general consensus, or the way that I interpret it, is that an Aries moon, it is more intense and strong than the Aries sun. And I'll get more into depth as to why I think that, or in what ways they're stronger than the Aries sun. So, as I said in the generic moon versus sun video, the sun is more obvious to other people because it basically acts literally like a spotlight. So whatever sign the sun was transiting at the time that you was born, there's basically a spotlight on that area of your life, indicated by that sign. However, you do also have the houses, which is like a more in depth and complicated sort of representation of your chart, and the house. That the planet is in will also kind of tell you what area of life the aspect's playing out in, and then aspects that it has to other planets. But as far as what sign the planet's in, that can also obviously give you some indication as to what that means in your chart. So, anyways, yeah. So, the sun is more of a spotlight. It's more obvious to other people. So it seems more intense from the outside looking in because it is more obvious. Because obviously the moon, if you think about nighttime, it's dark. There's less light available, so things are more hidden away and under wraps. But the sun, obviously, it's represent in the daytime, so there's more light available, things are more clear, things are more like realistic in a certain sense, because sun versus night versus day, sun versus moon. So the moon is more hidden away, so it's much less obvious to people on the outside. However, because it's representing your emotions as opposed to just your identity as a person, it is more felt on a deeper internal level, like I said in the generic moon sun comparison video. So yeah, it's felt on a deeper level with the moon. So if you think about it, the moon is a soft, feminine, motherly planet, the natural ruler of Cancer. So Aries is a very masculine, alpha male, aggressive sort of sign, and therefore it's not a place where the moon is naturally going to be very comfortable. And I know I did say this in the Aries detailed explanation video, if you watched that, when I was explaining exactly what the Aries moon means and how it could manifest in your life. However, just more generically, I would say that the all of the positive traits of Aries and all of the negative traits also of Aries, they are going to be emphasized even stronger when it is the moon that's in the sign of Aries as opposed to the sun. So I feel like the sun in Aries, obviously it's more obvious to other people, but they kind of prefer to represent their strength and their typical Aries characteristics of bravery, courage, aggression at times, pioneering innovation, trailblazer, leadership. They prefer to demonstrate all these typical Aries traits as self evident. and they don't need to really show it off too much, even though they want to because it is the sun. So they, they get an ego boost from showing off these Aries traits. Therefore, they are going to naturally want to show them off more. They also, at the same time, kind of don't show them off because they're quite contented. Also, the sun is exalted in Aries, so the sun has an ease of function in the sign of Aries. So it's quite comfortable there, in other words, is what that means. So because of that, it's less of a mismatch of energies between the planet, the sun, and then the energy of the Aries sign itself. Because obviously with the moon is not very comfortable with the energy of the Aries sign, but conversely, the sun is very comfortable with the energy of the Aries sign. So there's less of a clash in that way. So there's more inner peace. So obviously, Aries isn't a sign you would consider very peaceful or calm or, in the slightest. But they are more comfortable when it's in the sun position because, as I say, the sun is happier there than the moon is there. And also, yeah, they don't always succeed in this, but they prefer to come across as making their strength be self-evident. They kind of expect that everyone's going to notice how strong and how much of a good leader they are, and they won't question their authority. They'll just follow them, and do whatever the Aries wants. And they kind of just expect that people will realize how strong they are and fall into line with their opinions or orders in a way, if you like, and people won't oppose them. They'll just listen and go along with whatever the Aries has ordered them to do. They prefer to be like, hey, look, I'm an Aries, I'm obviously confident, I don't even need to try and show you or prove to you that I'm confident because I just naturally am, and you should therefore accept me as your leader and listen to what I tell you. Of course, though, they also do like to show it off because they are Aries sun, so obviously it does make them feel good and boost their ego when they show off these Aries traits. So one side of them does obviously want to play them up and show them off, but they also kind of don't because there's an ease of function in this position. So the sun's just kind of happy. So it's like, you know what, they don't expect to have to tell you constantly that they're amazing and wonderful and they should be the leaders of the situation and you should be the follower. Subordinate position to them because they just expect that everyone's going to naturally notice that about them from their mannerisms and their behaviour on the outside and the energy they're giving off, and they're just going to expect people to notice that and fall in line and accept them as a leader just naturally without any resistance or opposition. The moon in Aries is felt on a deep internal level, like the moon is in all the signs, as compared to the sun in all the signs. That coupled with the fact that there's a mismatch of energies because the moon is nowhere near as happy as the sun is in the sign of Aries in general, what ends up happening is there's more of a mismatch and it's more hidden away. But obviously, if you think the nature of Aries, they're the cardinal fire sign, so their energy is very outwards and you can't easily restrain or hold back, if you like, the energy of Aries. Aries energy has to come out. You can't hold it in because of the nature of the sign of Aries. Like, it's cardinal fire, so it indicates like an explosion, a grenade, a bomb going off. So it's destructive energy, and if you don't give it a healthy outlet, which the sun Aries, it's more of a healthy outlet because they show it on the outside and it's more comfortable in that position. So their aggressiveness is somewhat weakened by the fact that it's in such a good position. There's less inner conflict brewing within them. So the sun Aries, it's allowed, the outward energy of the sign is allowed to flow outwards more comfortably and with less restriction. But with the moon is a very private part of your personality, and it's something that you want to naturally hide away. And it is also something you're not even necessarily consciously aware of in yourself. Like, sometimes the moon, you don't even know yourself that you have the traits of your moon or that you have the needs of your moon that you need to fulfill in life in order to be happy. You don't even necessarily know this yourself as the actual person that has them because the moon is so private in that way in its nature. And if you think Aries is a cardinal fire, as I say, so it's energy that needs to be let out and it can't be restrained or held back. But the moon is private, so it is naturally always going to be restrained and held back. So when you have Aries in the moon, it's like the ram, the fire energy, the aggressiveness when it's stressed out sort of vibe that the ram gives off. It can't be let out in a healthy way. It's always being restrained and held back, even if you're not even consciously aware of it, if it's your moon, which is in that sign of Aries, because the moon is so private by its very nature. So I do think this translates in the real world to Moon in Aries is always kind of on guard for perceived threats. They are always, they can even verge on the point of paranoia where they think that people are out to get them and they're being offensive toward them deliberately for absolutely no good reason. And they're just, they perceive threats even where it doesn't exist or slights where they don't exist. Like, you could say something to a person but you don't even mean it to be a negative thing necessarily, but they would just take it the wrong way if they have an Aries moon, because Aries moon is always kind of on guard for people threatening them because they are restraining and trying to hold back Aries energy, and by its very nature, Aries energy is not energy that can easily be restrained or held back successfully. So they're always on edge, kind of on guard for anticipation of threats, and because their Aries traits aren't able to be let out naturally in an easy way and represented as self evident, the Aries in them is not as happy, so it kind of intensifies all of the negative traits of the sign. But on a more positive note, the other side of things, it also can strengthen all the positive traits associated with the sign as well. So for Aries, their most positive traits would be, courage, leadership, trailblazer. All of these traits are positive of Aries, high energy, self confidence. So these positives are strengthened even further when it's Aries moon versus Aries sun, but the negatives are also strengthened further. And to a degree, this is the same of every sign when it's in the moon as opposed to the sun, because the moon by nature is the more emotional side of you rather than just, the identity that you have, more outer identity that you have. But especially pronounced with Aries, I would say the moon versus the sun is that the moon is constantly on guard and anticipating threats even where they don't exist necessarily, and it's much more defensive. However, I would say the Aries sun, they're driven to achieve their goals in order to satisfy their ego. So I would say that the Aries sun could possibly actually be more serious in their mannerisms and way of life than the Aries moon. And this is because the Aries moon is like their emotions are fiery and driven, and they want to, do everything first. So they have unrest and, anxiety and this restless energy within them that the Aries sun does not suffer from to nearly the same level. However, the Aries sun could be more serious because they are driven to have this fiery energy as their identity and their very personality in order to achieve their goals. So, say they want to get a job, they will be serious about the fact they want to get the job because the Aries energy passion that they have is fueling their ego towards being acting like a typical Aries, so having these traits of leadership and being the first, being the winner of every situation. So they're going to be very serious about, I need to get this job, I need to not be losing the opportunity to anyone else, I need to come out on top. So in that way, they're doing that to fuel their ego and preserve their reputation and their self-identity. So they're more serious about being passionate about reaching their goals. Whereas the moon, I feel like the Aries moon is less serious until you piss them off, because they have this Aries restlessness and drive with their emotions, and obviously if their sun's not Aries as well, they won't have this in their identity, so it's more hidden away, and it's more sort of, they don't act on it all the time as much, because it's less of a consciously aware thing that they have. They're less consciously aware of the needs that they have to do this, and they are also it's emotional, so they don't get an ego boost or a reward, or they don't feel good about themselves by acting on these Aries traits like the sun does. So they try and act on them less, and therefore they're normally more fun-loving and less serious than the Aries sun. So that's just an interesting contrast I thought I'd point out. The Aries sun is much less intense than the Aries moon, although obviously it is more outward and more obvious than the Aries moon because the sun always is, because it's a spotlight versus, like the nighttime. But whilst the moon is a lot more aggressive and more intense than the sun, the moon is less serious than the sun until you piss them off. When you do piss them off, because this restlessness that Aries is known for, because it exists in their emotional state and their true inner self, their emotions are more what's unstable as opposed to their reputation or, this drive to succeed, or the instability that they feel when they don't succeed. It's linked to their their identity. With the moon, it's linked to their deeper inner emotions and deeper inner self, so it's more crucial that they protect it because it's not just their ego that it's fueling, it's fueling their inner sense of security. So they are much more, it's much more important to them to release these Aries traits, but then they can't because it's blocked by the fact that it's in the moon and by the very nature of the moon. But also, their emotions are much more unstable than just their ego because the moon represents emotions. So, if you piss them off, the Aries moon is going to have a more dramatic reaction as far as aggression is concerned than the Aries sun, most likely. However, another thing is that if you start an argument with an Aries sun, because their ego is tied up with these Aries traits, they are going to look outwardly to be more fired up by the situation, more aggressive. They are more likely to actively, fire back at you and fight back. If you threaten them or like start a conflict with them, they're going to fight directly with you more intensely when it's the Aries sun. The Aries moon will not be as obvious about it because they are more private because of the moon instead of the sun being in Aries, but they are actually going to feel the anger towards you for doing what you did on a more intense internal level. It's going to be stronger. Like the aggression and the anger issues Aries is known for, the moon is much worse than the sun. So the sun is kind of like, they're going to show off, so they're going to make a scene. They're going to be like, you challenged me, how dare you call me an idiot or whatever you called them or whatever you did. They're going to look very angry. They're going to blow up like a typical Aries, especially if they also have Mars in Aries. But they're not really going to internally feel emotionally upset by what you did as much as the Aries moon because it's their ego really that you've hurt. Whereas with the Aries moon, you've hurt their actual emotions on a deeper internal level. So they're not going to really fight outwardly as much, but on the inside, they're going to be fuming. They're going to be seething with rage. They're going to be so much angrier than the Aries sun would be in the same situation, but they will show it less openly on the outside. It will be less obvious. I feel like an Aries sun is the type of person who would beat you up and have a fight with you physically, and then afterward they would move on and they'd forgive you and all that. Aries moon, they're more likely to just hate your guts for years afterwards. Now, Aries isn't a sign that really holds grudges. They do forgive and forget quite easily, and this is true for Mars Aries, Sun and Moon, any placement in Aries. Because their anger's quite explosive in the heat of the moment. Once it's died down, they don't really have any reserve anger left within them in order to sustain holding a grudge. Also, they're generally quite positive people as well, so I would say that they don't really hold grudges in any placement, but the moon will probably hold a grudge for longer than the sun because the sun will just beat you up physically or they'll have a big explosion and they'll insult you with words or whatever they choose to do as a reaction to the situation. They'll do it openly, but they'll get a kind of release from doing that. Their emotional baggage around the situation will be cleared because they've managed to get it out. Whereas the moon won't do that, so it will seep inside of them and they will keep getting angrier and angrier, but they won't necessarily show it outwardly. I feel like an Aries moon is the one who's more likely to express anger in a sneaky way. They're not passive aggressive because obviously Mars is strong in their sign, so they're not passive aggressive like Cancer, for example, but because it's the moon and it's more private, whereas the sun's probably more likely to beat you up, punch you in the face, the moon in the same situation is probably more likely to throw a brick through your window and, smash your window or vandalise your car or whatever. They'll do something like that. Whereas an Aries sun, they won't get any satisfaction really even from doing that sort of retaliation if you argue with them. The Aries sun, they will not be satisfied until they physically will come up to you and confront you, punch you in the face or whatever they're going to do. Then they can move on. But they're not deeply emotionally wounded to the same level. Whereas an Aries moon, they're going to be more deeply emotionally wounded, so they're going to want to get back at you, and through a more subtle way, but nastier way at the same time. So basically, I'm not sure if there's really much else I need to say about this. Hopefully, I've got out all of my thoughts in a way that would be you could understand. I may always revisit this video at a later date if there is something that I remember that I haven't actually talked about or that I forgot to mention. But yeah, basically, fundamentally, the Aries moon is more intense. Fundamentally, the moon in Aries is more intense than the sun in Aries as far as all of the positive traits typically associated with the sign, as well as all of the negative traits typically associated with the sign. However, it is usually less serious until they're in a bad mood or stressed or pissed off, and also it's much more hidden away because of the moon's very nature. And conversely, the sun in Aries is more obvious because of the sun's very nature, more sort of outwardly aggressive, passionate, energetic, outspoken, all of these typical Aries traits, but the positives and negative traits are both not quite as pronounced as they are in the moon. And the sun is generally more serious because their ego and their social standing and identity are tied in with their Aries traits of ambition and determination and that sort of thing. So yeah, thank you guys for listening to this video. Hope to catch you next time.